Did you know that American adults pay an average of $177 out of pocket every year on medicine? That shoots up to $456 every year if you're over the age of 65. It's actually higher if you're over the age of 80. And if you have a chronic condition, those costs can skyrocket. For example, if you have diabetes, you should expect to pay an average $700 a year out of pocket or more. Don't even get me started on if you don't have insurance. That's if you do. So the question is, what would you do to lower those costs? What would you do to have an extra $700 in your pocket a year? Would you commit an $80 million heist at a pharmaceutical warehouse? Welcome to Capers and Cocktails, a true crime podcast that doesn't take itself too seriously and gives you something to enjoy while you listen. The following content may be disturbing to some. Discretion is advised. If you're enjoying one of our themed cocktails, ensure you're of legal drinking age and have fun, but drink responsibly. Once the sun went down in Enfield, Connecticut on Saturday, March 13th, 2010, some men drove up to a nondescript warehouse owned by Eli Lilly and Company, dropped off a ladder in the rear parking lot of the warehouse facility, and left. Eli Lilly and Company was founded in 1876 by, and named after, Colonel Eli Lilly, a pharmaceutical chemist and a Union Army veteran of the American Civil War. By 2010, the company was earning over $4 billion, yes, billion with a B, in revenue every year. Just after 10:30 p.m. that same night, March 13th, a tractor trailer backed right up to the loading dock of that warehouse in Enfield, Connecticut. After the tractor trailer arrived at the gray, boring-looking warehouse, the driver of the truck and a passenger jumped out of the vehicle and hustled over to the office's front door. They looked inside the window and made sure the building was empty. The two men rushed back to the parking lot and plopped the ladder that had been delivered earlier against the wall of the warehouse and climbed up to the roof. The thieves then began cutting a human-sized hole in the tar-covered metal sheeting. They then quickly set up a rope and some climbing equipment and rappelled down into the warehouse, Mission Impossible style. They rushed immediately to the warehouse's alarm and communication panels. They popped open the panels, and with a deftness that made it pretty clear that this was not their first time around the heist block, they disconnected the very specific wires that would deactivate the alarm system without setting off a quite undesirable silent alarm. Then they disabled the building's surveillance system. Well, now it's time to get to work. They opened the warehouse's loading bay door, and two accomplices backed the trailer up so that it sat flush with the ramp. All four of the thieves started up forklifts that they borrowed from the warehouse and loaded up the forklifts with Zyprexa, an antipsychotic medication, Prozac, an antidepressant, and Gemzar, a chemotherapy drug that treats breast, ovarian, non-small cell lung, and pancreatic cancer. They then drove those forklifts onto the truck, unloaded them, and rinsed and repeated for hours. By 3:40 a.m. the next morning, when they drove off with their haul and all was said and done, they'd managed to snag nearly $80 million in stolen pharmaceuticals. One of the thieves drove the tractor trailer containing the stolen drugs from Connecticut to Florida, where they met some co-conspirators, unloaded the drugs from the tractor trailer, and stored them in a public storage facility in the Miami area. Don't you just love it when a drink is right on theme? I feel like we've had some good ones this season. The Pink Panther for the Pink Panthers, the Screwdriver to toast Tim the Toolman Taylor, and today's theme was too on brand to pass up. If you can't steal your painkillers, you might as well drink them. People all over the globe love the Painkiller. Its history goes all the way back to the 1970s and the British Virgin Islands. Daphne Henderson, a bartender at the Soggy Dollar Bar on Jost Van Dyke Island, is credited with creating the Painkiller. It's more of a sail-up bar than a walk-up bar, and word spread amongst the sailors and tourists that this drink was one that you shouldn't pass up. It swiftly rose to the top of the bar's cocktail menu and then spread around the world. To make this delectable drink, take 2 parts rum, 4 parts pineapple juice, 1 part orange juice, and 1 part cream of coconut, and add to a shaker with ice. Shake to chill and combine. Strain over fresh ice into a glass garnished with a pineapple wedge and top with a sprinkle of nutmeg. For the mocktail version, take 2 parts rum syrup, 4 parts pineapple juice, 1 part orange juice, and 1 part cream of coconut, and add to a shaker with ice. Shake and strain into a glass, similarly garnished. Drink as many as it takes to take away all of your pain, and in the words of Soggy Dollar Bar, stay soggy. Employees of Eli Lilly discovered the crime on Monday morning and immediately called authorities. It became pretty clear early on in the investigation that the thieves were professionals. However, even professionals make mistakes, and in the case of these 2 guys, they made some pretty big mistakes. Authorities guessed that the men left in a hurry, at least partially because they left behind most of their tools and several empty water bottles. This is a little odd to me for a couple of reasons, mostly that by 2010, the use of DNA evidence had become well established in forensic science. The general public would know that DNA could be extracted from various sources, including saliva left on a water bottle and used to identify individuals or establish relationships. Maybe they were in a real hurry. Knowing that DNA testing takes time, the authorities turned their attention to the tools. All the tools seemed to be fairly new. They had left a variety of hand tools and power tools, and all of them were Husky brand. As it turns out, Husky tools are exclusively sold in Home Depot, a lucky break for investigators. They worked with Home Depot to get access to their sales databases and searched to see how many purchases had been made with this exact combination of 8 tools they'd found at the warehouse. To their surprise, there was only one result. The tools had been purchased in Flushing, New York, the day before the heist. Flushing was about a 2.5-hour drive from Enfield, where the warehouse was. After reaching out to that Home Depot in Flushing, they were able to track down security camera footage of 2 men loading their newly bought tools into the back of an Infiniti QX56. No luck tracking down the actual men yet, because I presume the tools were purchased with cash, but they had some nice corroborating evidence teed up for when it might be needed. A few months later, the DNA test results came back, and unfortunately, they did not match a person, but they did match some additional crimes. The same DNA was found at a GlaxoSmithKline facility in Virginia and in 2 similar warehouse heists in Illinois. So maybe the criminals were more intelligent than originally thought. DNA only matters if there's a match in the system. The score those guys got in the Eli Lilly heist took place in an era now dubbed the Golden Age of Pharmaceutical Thefts, a period in the 2000s when pharma heists became far more lucrative than bank robberies. In 2009, a year prior, a total of $200 million in pharmaceuticals had been stolen in dozens of burglaries, more than 4 times what had been taken that year from banks. There would be another lucky break soon enough in the Eli Lilly case. A few days after the heist, an anonymous call came in. The caller let authorities know that at least 3 of the folks involved in the heist would be having a bar meetup at a pub in Florida with discussion topics around distribution and payment for the stolen pharmaceuticals. One of these men would be a known interstate theft specialist known to authorities only as El Gato. Police and FBI set up surveillance at the Florida bar and learned from that El Gato and the other 2 men at the meeting that the Eli Lilly heist, as well as the Virginia and Illinois heists, were not one-off crimes committed by a few thieves, but instead a crime syndicate that was well organized and large, with a fleet of trucks, sales teams, and entire teams dedicated to creating fake labels to apply to the bottles. Once the meds were disguised, they were sold on the secondary wholesale market. It turns out this pharmaceutical syndicate had gotten away with truckloads of drugs, managing to steal hundreds of millions of dollars in prescription medication, tobacco, and other goods in crimes that crossed multiple state lines. And I'm guessing people were getting paid for tips because another anonymous tip came in, leading investigators to a storage facility. Lucky, again, for authorities, a syndicate thief left their storage facility key in a rental car, and police opened several storage units that were filled with stolen drugs, as well as the supplies needed to repackage them up for resale. But I haven't forgotten about our 4 thieves from the original crime that brought us here today. Authorities were able to track down the source of the DNA, and it was a 45-year-old Ahmed Villa. Ahmed, born in Havana, Cuba in 1965, came to the U.S. for rock music, which he felt filled his mind. Settling in Miami, he worked as a handyman and installer, but had run-ins with the law, serving time for theft in 2002. Later, facing financial pressures to support his family, he joined his brothers in warehouse thefts, specializing in disabling alarm systems. Ahmed and his brother, 41-year-old Amory, who both lived in Miami, had a pretty long rap sheet for burglary. It was believed that they worked closely with El Gato himself. To snag Ahmed and hopefully some of the bigger fish in the stolen pharmaceutical trade, the FBI invented a wholesale pharmaceutical company. They used one of their own criminal informants to set up a sale on May 3, 2012. Shortly after the setup, local and federal law enforcement began making coordinated arrests of 22 individuals across 4 states. That included Ahmed and Amory, as well as Yomani Nunez Aguilar, or as you may know him, El Gato. They also arrested Alexander Marquez, who had driven the tractor trailer from Connecticut to Florida immediately after the heist. 42-year-old Yosmani, aka El Gato, and 41-year-old Alexander were both Cuban nationals and both pled guilty to 1 count of transportation of stolen property. El Gato was sentenced by U.S. District Judge Janet Bond Arterton in New Haven, Connecticut, to 75 months of imprisonment, followed by 3 years of parole. He was also ordered to pay back over $60 million in restitution. He was released from prison on August 12th, 2019, and I don't know if he paid back any of that restitution, but somehow I kind of doubt it. Tractor-trailer driver Alexander got a year in the slammer and a year of parole. He was released on March 9th, 2016. On May 2nd, 2014, Amory Villa pled guilty to 1 count of conspiracy, 4 counts of theft from an interstate shipment, and 1 count of interstate transportation of stolen property. He was sentenced to 98 months of prison and 36 months of parole. He was also tried for other multiple thefts in lots of states at the same time, so he actually received multiple sentences and more than 18 years total jail time. He's not slated to be released until 2026. His brother, Ahmed Villa, the only one whose DNA was actually found at the scene, you guessed it, pled guilty to 2 counts of conspiracy to commit theft from an interstate shipment and 5 counts of theft from an interstate shipment. He was sentenced by that same U.S. District Judge to 84 months of imprisonment, followed by 3 years of parole for his role in the theft of pharmaceuticals from the Eli Lilly company. The sentence was to run concurrently with a 140-month sentence that Ahmed was sentenced to. That was a lot of sentence. Anyway, based on the related federal conviction. In addition, he was ordered to pay $60,994,213 in restitution. That, combined with El Gato's restitution, would make Eli Lilly more than whole for what they stole. Ahmed Villa was released from prison on June 7, 2018. When interviewed a few years later, Ahmed's attorney would say about him, quote, "It's funny. I sort of think of him as probably a criminal from another time, an era when it wasn't a bunch of kids out to pay for a drug habit or someone robbing a bank for $16. He was a professional in what he did. I'm not sure it should be glorified, but it's definitely a different era of criminal," end quote. The Villa brothers and their team were among the most proficient thieves in U.S. history. Operating from Miami between 2009 and 2011, they carried out a series of burglaries that yielded almost $100 million in goods. This particular crime remains the largest pharmaceutical heist in American history. Today, Eli Lilly and Company is known for its clinical depression drugs, Prozac and Cymbalta, as well as its antipsychotic medication, Zyprexa. It makes the bulk of its billions of dollars in profits through diabetes drugs. The company made $34.12 billion in revenue in 2023 alone. I don't think the Villa brothers or El Gato made much of a dent in their profits, as it turns out. Somehow, I'm not too surprised. I sure do hope El Gato and the rest stay away from the drug-stealing business, even if the pharmaceutical companies are robbing us blind daily. Thanks for hanging out with me. You know the drill. Like, subscribe, review, comment, share, drink some more. And if you want, book me for your next virtual happy hour. The details are in the fancy description box. And speaking of the description box, you should follow me on social media. Also, leave some funny comments sometimes. Hate comments are okay too, but only if they're funny, okay? Okie dokie. Next week is a skipped upload, but in a couple of weeks for our crime, we're staying in America, but we're going back in history, way back in history, to a crime that at least a few people say might be a bit pioneering. The first daytime bank heist in America's history? And a classic Western cocktail to boot. Cowboy boot. I'll see you in 2 weeks. And remember, there are always alternatives to stealing something as boring as pharmaceutical drugs.